What's up there, Workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and I wanted to talk a little bit about new player tips. Now, there's a lot out there. There's even new player things on this channel. So definitely feel free to go far and wide for anything that's answering exactly the question you have, and definitely leave it in the comments below if I don't get to it here. But I wanted to talk about just basic UI stuff. And so I actually found a few guides. I'm going to link what I can here in the description below so that anything that I say, maybe you can find it phrased a little bit differently. But let's start with just the basic UI. Now, the first thing you're going to need to focus on in game is you're going to need to get leveled up. And the best way to do that is you're going to have to do it through quests. There might be faster sources of experience out there if you're reading about those, but for your main character, you have to get through the main story anyway because so much is locked behind it. Now, I have mine moved down here to the bottom right. It's normally up in the top left, and this little emblem on it with like a flame around it is going to actually be your guide. And anytime you get lost, you can just click on it and it will pull up that quest. Now, mine says to be continued because I'm caught up at the moment. If you want to be able to move things like this, then you actually just go down here to your HUD layout and you can move anything you want. And so that's how I've moved that. And that's more advanced, but just in case you wonder why anything on my screen may look a little differently as I do this. Now, there are other types of quests that are going to carry you along because main story may or may not be enough for you, just depending on kind of your experience gain. Now, the first one I come across just in front of me here is this little card looking thing. This is a leave quest. These are basically repeatable quests that pull from a leave allowance. And so if I open up my quest log on this character, a leave allowance here caps out at 100. You just gain them over time. Don't really worry about it for now. Most of the time it's going to spend at cap, but it's a great source of ways to level crafters and gatherers and that battle class that you just want to try out a little bit. I wouldn't worry about them too much. And within these leave meets, there's going to be field craft for your gatherers, trade craft for your crafters, and then actually at the lower levels, there's battle craft, which will allow you to kind of use those allowances to level up pretty much infinitely. So the next would be guild hests. Now, guild hests, the easiest way for me to find these would be in this guide here. And doing your guild hest is going to be the introduction to your dungeons. They're very, very easy to do. They actually have their own little tag here. And so doing these is a way to just introduce you to the beginnings of group content, where most of the standard good practices of group content, if they're ignored, you're still going to go ahead and be successful getting through these. It's typically very hard to die in these compared to dungeons and trials. And then moving up from there, you're going to go into our dungeons. In this game, they are done in 4-mans. You unlock them throughout, and as soon as you have enough unlocked, you're going to have a roulette of them. And then trials. Trials are basically like single fight, not a lot of clearing, and you're going to also be seeing these in 4-mans, and we actually can eventually get up into larger man content as you level up, dealing in 8-mans and even 24-man content down the road. Now, as you're pushing through the zones in this main story, maybe you're jumping into a little bit of the group content, maybe you're not, you can actually go ahead and do what's called side quests. Now, side quests typically aren't very important other than they just give you experience and a little bit of lore and context to the game that you may not get otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and teleport here, and then we'll see some side quests. Now, I teleported to one of the newer zones because I don't clear a lot of my side quests, and so you can see them all around me. And these are basically just right here. That's a side quest. And so just like these other ones, you can still accept them. They're typically going to give you a little bit of experience and money, sometimes something else with it. There is this lovely triple triad here, and what this is a card game so that I can challenge them to that. And so those are going to be most of what you see over all these different quest givers and zones. So if I open up my map and I zoom out, you can see that there's side quests all throughout the zone. If I mouse over them, it'll even tell me what level they're designed for in case I know, is that something that I want to use to level maybe an alternate class. Now, if you are on a wrong class, like say I was on a gatherer, you'll see that these turn red and they have a little, that means that I don't meet the requirements. So I'm either not high enough level or I'm not the right class. And if I open this up, it will tell me kind of, hey, here's what we need from you. You need to be Disciple or Magic. If I were to go ahead and switch to a Disciple of War, I would click on this and then it would allow me to pick it up, but I would not be able to turn it in until I was at least that level or higher. And so when I go to turn it in, I would have to switch to one of my actual classes that is at that level cap in this case, because I don't have anything that's between 67 and 70 at this exact moment. Now, the next thing you want to worry about is Hall of the Novice. Now, Hall of the Novice, you can find it in any of the 3 capital cities. I always go to mine in Gridania, and that's going to be in kind of that main inn area. The Hall of the Novice is a great way to learn how to play your class, and you're actually going to be getting a couple of items that help you get experience a little bit faster. And it's going to, literally, it is designed to prep new players and show them how to play your class, how to play your role. And you're going to be seeing that in the Adventurers Guilds at level 15. So Gridania, the Adventurers Guild, I typically view Gridania as my home city because my Grand Company is there. Grand Company is like an NPC guild. It's like your in-game guild that's not done with other players, and there's 3 of them currently in the game. And so I typically spend most of my time in the city of my Grand Company, but any of these would be fine. And so if I run in here, you have this little leaf here that's representative of new player. And if I go here, it'll say, hey, you know, would you like to go to Hall of the Novice? They have some other questions about, like, how do I become a mentor? What is a mentor? And so this is just a great way to go ahead and get used to, you know, anything that maybe is too new to you, that maybe this is your first MMO, or maybe it's just very different than anything you've played before. Now, the next thing I would like to say is, while we're talking about unlocking new things, if on one of these quest givers you see a plus sign, that little plus sign right there, if I open up my log here, all of mine that have these little plus signs on them, this plus sign right here means that this character has something that will unlock from completing that quest. So as you're going through, I would be sure to grab any quest that has a plus sign, because that's going to unlock everything from as small as a new emote to a new piece of content. The other style you'll see here is you'll actually see things locked to an actual type of class. And so this is a class quest, and this says, hey, you haven't done your level 70 Paladin class quest. So before the expansion drops, I should probably get around to doing that. And actually, while you're on a class, if you have a class quest available, it'll appear just underneath that main scenario quest up there. So that is definitely something to check on. The last type of quest that I think is really important is your repeatable quests, your dailies. And these are basically just beast tribes. This is what they're called. But anytime you're in any game and it has a daily that's done with a particular faction to build up reputation, I'm sure you've seen it before. That is all this is, and you'll get really unique and cool rewards for doing it. So I'm at one of the beast tribes here, and if I run over to the quest giver, you'll see I don't meet the right criteria, because this particular beast tribe is meant to be done on gatherers and crafters. So if I jump over to my crafters, you'll see this little kind of rotating circle here, and that means that I can come back and do these every single day. And then today's remaining allowance is 12, and so if I kind of burn through these, that caps the number of daily quests you can do in a day, and each one of those will take one of those allowances. And then if I come back tomorrow, the allowances will have reset, and there will be a different 3 quests from here that pull from a pretty set log. So as you do it day in and day out, you kind of get used to what the quests are that drop, and they're really quick to do, and they allow you to go over to the vendor for that faction and buy really neat items. A lot of times there's a cool mount or something that may be worth doing. So that kind of brings us to the next logical area, which is currencies. Beast tribes have their own currencies, and so that's what kind of makes me think about that. And you know, you can see the different currencies that there are. Tribal currencies. Here's the beast tribes. This particular beast tribe would give me Namatsu Kobans, because these are Namatsu, but there are different beast tribes for each of the different expansions so far, and I assume they will continue with this in Shadowbringers. But in our common currencies, we're going to start with guild. That's our money, our dollars, our basic, you know, what we're going to be spending all the time. I believe this is capped at 999 million for a single character, but obviously you can tell that's not a problem I have. Now, Grand Companies are the next currency, and so I am actually in Gridania running over to my Grand Company now. You can only pick one. You can switch. I never have. And basically that next currency is going to be used to buy things from their vendors, and you're going to kind of rank up and unlock different tabs. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with this Grand Companies that you should definitely take part in. But you can see that I can do different things to gain seals, such as turning in items from my crafters, my gatherers, or from my battle classes. And then I can actually go over to the quartermaster, and I can even buy things with these, and there's different tabs. There's a whole bunch of items to buy, and the bigger issue is going to be that you get close to cap surprisingly often. Ventures is what I spend a lot of mine on. That's what you send your retainers out with. Retainers are basically your bank. And so they are how you interact with the market board. They are how you actually go ahead and send them out on missions to bring you back cool stuff. You start with 2, but if you'd like to add to the cost of your account every month, you can actually get quite a bit more. And then Manderville Gold Saucer Points is basically our mini games. In World of Warcraft, I would compare this to Darkmoon Faire, since that's the most common game compared to Final Fantasy XIV Online. But I would say that basically it's just a bunch of mini games. It's totally optional content, and then every once in a while they add something very cool that can be bought with these, and so you kind of want to keep a few around from time to time. Now, as we move into battles, the next thing is tomestones. Tomestones are going to be your weekly currency, and so basically there's going to be a top tomestone at the time, genetics that will be capped, and that's going to keep rotating, and then it will rotate down to mendacity, which is kind of your secondary tier, and then you'll talk about kind of as you get down into poetics, where you kind of always have those, and they're just used to buy gear. And so basically it's what constantly keeps you chasing the next round of gear. Now retainers, now that we're here, are accessed through the summoning bell. And so you'll see I have 4 retainers because I've added to the cost of my subscription for the other 2. And within retainers, that's what's going to allow you to actually go ahead and keep a bank of items on them. And then you can actually sell items on the market board that way. And then you can assign them to ventures using those venture coins. Now let's go ahead and get back out to this tab here. And so the next currency is Crafter and Gatherer's Scripts. These are basically in-game currencies for crafters and gatherers. You can start getting them sooner than that, but basically these are used as the tomestones, kind of crafting and gathering. And so as you get into more advanced crafting and gathering, you can do what's called collectibles and different turn-ins, where you find an even higher quality version and it gets judged, and it can bring you in these things that can be used to buy really cool gear or consumables or other things like that. Now, I've been jumping a lot of different types of play, and so let's go ahead and open up our character screen and let's talk about the different classes and jobs. So the term class and job is used largely interchangeably at this point in Final Fantasy, but actually what we are is jobstones is what makes us a job. And so if I jump to my paladin, you'll see I have a jobstone equipped, and that happens at level 30. But for the most part, your class and your job, we typically just refer to things by their job name. And so level 30 is where that opens up, and level 30 is where you really start to feel your job identity begin to form, and then at level 50 you see it fully mature, and then it gets expanded at 60, 70, and then soon to be 80. Now there's 2 types of jobs in this game. There's disciples, there's battle, and then there's not battle, and so that's kind of the biggest section there, and you'll see it divided by these 2 tabs. Now within battle, there's war and magic. Magic is basically your casters down here, right here, your magical range DPS, and then war is going to be where you see like your melee and your tanks, but you'll see they've actually broken it up even further. So tanks are going to be the people taking the hits in the party. There are these blue emblems here, and they're going to basically be in big bad armor, and they're going to stand there. We're getting a 4th one added with Shadowbringers. Healers are the guys that are keeping everybody alive. They heal everybody and they toss out heals. And so both of these, their primary function in group play is very different than when they're playing by themselves. And then on this right side in red, these are all your DPS. We're getting an additional physical range DPS in Shadowbringers called Dancer. But you can see we have all these different DPS to choose from, and then mine are all at different levels. And so you can absolutely level them at whatever rate you want. You don't have to have multiple at cap. You can just have one. And once you have one at higher level, the others level faster behind it. So get that first one to cap as soon as possible. Now, hand and land. H is hand, L is land. What that really is that's your crafters and your gatherers. These are currently capped at level 70, but they're going to be level 80 very soon with Shadowbringers. And so this is what allows you to kind of interact with those kind of professions in game. We've seen professions in other games. This is much more advanced in here. There are all these different spells and abilities and things like that, but just so you know, these kind of exist. This is what people are talking about when they say DOH or DOL. Now, when you talk about playing like this, if you don't want to level everything, you might want to find other people and do it that way. So if we jump into kind of social, the social tab down here, you'll see free company. This is basically your guild. And so your guild will allow, they can put up different actions that are basically buffs. They give you access to a house. which I know our free company has, and there's cool vendors in there and stuff like that. It's just a neat place to hang out. That way, if you don't have to buy individual player housing, your free company may be able to provide a house to you, because housing is a very limited quantity thing. There's only so many per server, regardless of how many players are active on that server. And so that's a very common kind of term. We have GC for Grand Company, FC for Free Company, and FC means it's the one with the other people in it, and then GC isn't. Now, outside of that, we also have link shells. Link shells are basically chat rooms, and they can be cross-world, because this game does allow you to jump server to server. And so from any of the 3 main capital cities, we can actually world visit. Now, world visit is not like WoW's sharding system, where it just kind of does it to load balance. It's something that you opt into. So you can actually go visit other worlds, and you can even buy things off their market board and so on. Now, there's some limitations because it's not your world. So like your retainers aren't there, and so you naturally can't list things on the market board. You can't put things in your bank. There are limitations to the things you can do on that server, but a lot of things are there. Now, anything that wouldn't be done on their world doesn't mean you can't interact with those players. We could be using Cross-World Party Finder. And so as soon as I kind of show you where World Visit is, we'll talk about Party Finder, which is kind of an extension of the Duty Finder system. So visit another world server as long as it's on my data center, which is the bigger cluster. So here in North America, we have Aether and Primal. As long as everybody's on Aether, then I can go to any of the Aether servers. If anybody's on Primal, they can go to any of the Primal servers. Now, the next thing you're going to see all the time here is your Duty Finder. Duty Finder, I had this tab open a little bit earlier. This is where all your dungeons live. Yes, they have physical locations out in the world that you often enter to, and there's a quest that takes you there. But this is where you're going to queue into things to wait. And it has everything from some of the things tied to the Golden Saucer minigames, to PvP, to different raids, and trials, and all sorts of things are in here. And then we can even switch into our high-end duties and start to talk about extremes and, different things like that for progression. Now, you may want to not just randomly toss yourself in with people. You may want to find a very specific group, and that is where the Party Finder comes in. Party Finder, instead of it just queuing randomly, is where I can go see things that other people are looking to do. I can see things across my data center, or maybe just on my world, or private. And I can invite people to that to go do different kinds of, basically anything. I can go find people that want to do just roulettes together and be in a static group over and over and over. They're looking for specific dungeons, specific guild has, specific raids, and high-ends, looking for some Savage here. They're running what's called Sigmascape and Deltascape, so they're running very specific things they want to practice or they want to complete. And then as we move across, there's sometimes PvP groups up, people looking for help with various quests, fates, which are like out in the world little fights. They actually sync you to that level. Fate grinding used to be one of the better methods of grinding experience. Treasure hunt, which is where we talk about maps. There's these really cool treasure maps. You go out in the world, X marks the spot, you fight a battle there. Sometimes you can get teleported into almost like a Diablo treasure rift type thing. And then you can actually go in there and you can make a ton of money. It's a very fun alternative form of just having a lot of fun typically at level cap, even though there are lower level maps available. Hunts, which is kind of the more, advanced version of Fates that they've added in, where I can go off and hunt specific mobs. And then exploratory missions aren't really used much anymore. Deep Dungeons is basically a really cool leveling system that allows you start at level 1 every time, and it's basically play till you die. And so it's a really cool way to kind of taste the other classes or run with a group, see how far you can make it. And then there's what's called Eureka, but this is something that if you're new to the game, what you really need to know with the term Eureka is you need to know the term Relic. There's an alternative PvE every expansion that's called the Relic, and it's basically a grind for anybody that doesn't want to do super hard, intense content where they have to find specific friends and be willing to grind hours per week. They may say, you know what, I just want to play a little at my own convenience and I want to have access to really good gear. The Relic is that. And so the Relic says, hey, if you put in time instead of, the high difficulty, we'll give you this weapon that can be upgraded throughout the expansion to remain relevant. And then at the end of that expansion, it's typically the way it's been done so far is we'll reset that and there will be a new Relic grind that will take place in the next expansion. And so that's kind of a quick rundown through everything within the Party Finder tab, but all that content is available without the Party Finder tab. You can just go off and do that anytime you like. Now, when we talk about gear, going in here, there's going to be different attributes. Final Fantasy is really unique in that, for the most part, higher eye level is better. And so anytime you see an eye level, this says eye level 380. If I found an eye level 400 available for my class, you can see this is used for Gladiator, Marauder, Paladin, Warrior, Dark Knight, which means tanks. So anytime you see that grouping, if I found a level 400 item for tanks, this would be better. So I could just swap it out for that. The little blue plus sign means that I've altered the appearance, and that's called the glamour system. WoW, that would be called the transmog system, and that's what makes me look like a blue pig. My gear doesn't actually look like that. And then you see these two slots down here with the glowing blue circles. That's called materia. And so I actually slot those like gems. I slot them in, and then that's what ups the stats on my gear. And then you can follow different stat priorities and things like that, that you could just go out to Reddit and kind of look for what the best stat priorities are for your class if you don't have any preferences yourself. So what you would be looking for there, and then you might see terms within this like BIS. BIS in an MMO typically means best in slot. And so best in slot means it's the single best item that you could have, and anything less than that means that you're not at the very best that's currently achievable in the game. And so that's a really common thing there. Now, as I back out here, you'll see that I have these bars, HP, MP, and TP. These are about to change, and so I don't want to spend too long talking about it, but basically HP is how you live. MP and TP are currencies that you use for your abilities. We're about to find out about a bunch of changes on that, but that core concept that you're going to have points that you can use for your actions and points that determine whether or not you're dead is probably going to continue to be used. And then I have my experience bar at the top. That has 2 dashes right now because I'm at the current level cap, but if I switch to a class that's not, you'll see that it fills up, and then this little moon here means I'm achieving rested experience, which is what turns the bar blue, so I gain faster experience until I run out of rest. Another common concept as we talk about TP, MP and in the case of gathering, you have GP for gathering points, and then crafters actually have CP for crafting points, is, well, what am I using all of this for? Well, I'm using it to put out damage, which is often referred to by its DPS. It's damage per second. That way you can easily compare abilities that cast slower to abilities that cast faster. And then you have sometimes healing per second. There's also terms like overtime, which means that I'm going to cast something on them and it's going to continue to do damage slowly, like a poison. And so that would be your damage over time, a dot, or a heal over time, a hot. And then you have things like enmity or threat or hate, which are all just terms for how aggravated, how much aggro, how intensely the enemy mob is staring at you, the enemy monster is fighting, and that's typically something your tank wants to be on top of that threat list. They want to be the person it's most angry at because they're the guy that brought the big armor, so they're there to take the hits. And so that's all kind of important things. Then we start to talk about rotation. And when we talk about rotation, you're looking at the different abilities, these different actions down here. And as you open up your actions, these basically end up getting put into what's called a rotation. And that's a priority where it's like, okay, first you're going to do this, then this, then this. And within that rotation, you're basically looking at cast times, recast times. Recast times means it cannot be cast again. So this has a recast time of 90 seconds. It cannot be recast for 90 seconds. Now it says cast time instant, which means it takes no time to cast, but then I can't use it again for 90 seconds. As opposed to, if we switch to, say, it's really easy to see on like casters. If I switch over here, you'll see that this has a cast time of 2.48, and then it's recastable immediately. And so the recast time there is tied to how long the cast time is. You look also at like off the global cooldown. A global cooldown is the amount of time where if I go ahead and press an ability, if I jump over here and cast an ability there, there's a second there where while I cast that ability, I can't cast anything else. That's the global cooldown. Games like this build this in to account for latency, but occasionally they'll put abilities off the global cooldown. And that adds to a lot of excitement within making the rotation feel faster, especially because this game has a particularly slow global cooldown compared to some other games. And so that can allow you to cast different things. Now, within these abilities, typically they're going to be single target or multi-target. Multi-target is referred to as AoE. That is your area of effect. So, my area of effect on my warrior is a cone, and so it's a cone that goes out. Sometimes it's a circle, sometimes it's something you place, sometimes it's a line AoE. That shape can definitely change, but that's really kind of dependent on that. And that is actually when you're in group play, you're going to have what's called a limit break, which is a big like super bar out of like an old traditional fighting game that you're all leveling up as a group. And then as a group, one person can use it. It's typically used as a DPS thing. The DPS are going to cast it to do a big wave of damage. And depending on the type of DPS will determine the type of limit break that is available to you. And typically you're going to wait for that bar to get as high as you think you can get it. It has a max, and then you're going to go ahead and use that. So when we talk about like what your role is, that's basically your tank, your healer, or your DPS, and then we refer to everybody as their jobs. So gladiators really aren't referred to because they become paladins at 30, marauders become warriors, conjurers become white mage, Arcanists, we have Summoner, Scholar. They're the only one that has 2 job choices. So when you're picking a class to level, think about that, because the experience you gain on one job, since they share the same base class, it actually, at least as of today, still levels them both. I wouldn't be shocked to see them separate that one day, since they seem to have tried that out once and not liked the way that worked. Archers become bards, rogues become ninjas, lancers become dragoons, pugilists become monks, thaumaturges become black mages. And then we also have what's called a limited job. A limited job is a job that operates outside of the standard battle class system. The only limited job in-game at the time of this recording is Blue Mage. We assume they'll add more. And Blue Mage basically has an alternate way to level and gain its skills. And because it doesn't function the same way as everybody else, they didn't want to necessarily balance it with everybody else. And so it has its own version of PvE. It has its own version of in-game. And it does have group play, but it really isn't allowed in the standard duty finder. It's more of a party finder only, very specific types of content, and it allows them to kind of break the rules by which the rest of the classes have to be balanced and function to keep the game relatively cohesive. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Now, as you go ahead and level up, you want to do a couple of things. You want to focus on your main story, and then if you have other energy in a day, you want to focus on roulettes, especially the leveling roulette. It opens at level 16 for you, and once you have this, you want to do this as often as possible because it is a huge chunk of experience the first time you do it each day. Now you'll see that it says Adventurer in Need. Adventurer in Need here means that right now there's not enough tanks, and they're going to give me a bonus if I do it on a tank. And so that can really help you kind of decide what that next class you want to level is, and I would definitely pay attention to that. Other things that work really well are the deep dungeons, your Palace of the Dead, Heaven on High, and whatever future chapter of that gets called. And then you want to focus on making sure that your gear stays decent. A lot of times there's like vendor gear, but most of the time class quests and all that will provide a lot of that for you, and running dungeons regularly. So that's definitely a big piece of that. Your weapon is going to be one of the big things that you really want to pay attention to as you level up. And so you can see, like, I haven't been playing my Paladin much lately. I haven't even finished my level 70 class quest, and this is not really a good weapon. And so even though I have access to all this gear that I'm borrowing from my warrior, I don't have a good Paladin weapon. So if I wanted to start playing my Paladin again actively, I would want to go ahead and either go buy a piece of gear or go get access to a piece of gear through like tomestones or something like that to replace this. That would definitely be something worth doing. Now, really, that is a good general overview, and I feel like I've talked about a lot of basic terms. I've talked about everything from kind of an introduction to your character screen, introduction to how quests work, introduction to what jobs are, and some basic terminology. But the game is a lot bigger than this, and it's going to do a good job of kind of teaching you along the way. But keep in mind that a lot of people have been playing this for 5 years. This may not have been their first MMO, and so Brian and I forget that new players don't have all this knowledge just baked in. So definitely feel free to ask any questions you have. We have guides on a lot of it, but we have a lot more guides that we have yet to make. So definitely let us know, and we will expand on this in as many ways as possible. I hope this helps. I hope this really just acts as a good primer for some basic terms you need to use. I'm going to put some links down in the description below to a couple of our videos, a couple of not our videos, so that maybe somebody can phrase it a little differently if what I said didn't quite make sense. And then even a good Reddit post that just acts as a visual guide to kind of everything that you really might want to know, in case that text form, that visual thing you can hold on to bookmarked, is the easier way to do it. My name is Chris with Work to Game. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time.
What's going on, Workforce? Chuck here. It's been a good long month, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for hitting that subscribe button. I just wanted to invite my friend Terry, the T-Rex from Texas, out here. Howdy, y'all. How's it going? This is a really fun end screen video. We should have written a script, right, Chuck? Oh, I agree totally. In fact, I think both our voices sound exactly the same. What are we to do? I don't know. I think we need to get a better voice actor. Yes, I agree. Which one of us is talking? Ah. They're still here. What are we going to do? I guess we're going to stop and record.